Well, hello. Thanks for joining us. It is, maybe 8 or 9 weeks into Anything But Ordinary.
It just keeps going.
It is, a long family tree, and we're even condensing it some. And this last week, Barry preached about Joseph and his brothers who sold him into slavery. And so you can hear the scripture and the message. And if you want, there'll be a note in the podcast description if you've already listened where you can jump ahead to hear some reflection.
Genesis 37, verses 1 through 4 and 12 through 28. I invite you to listen. Jacob lived in the land of Canaan, where his father was an immigrant. This is the account of Jacob's descendants. Joseph was 17 years old and tended the flock with his brothers. While he was helping the sons of Bilhah and Zilpah, his father's wives, Joseph told their father unflattering things about them. Now Israel loved Joseph more than any of his other sons because he was born when Jacob was old. Jacob had made for him a long robe. When his brothers saw that their father loved him more than any of his brothers, they hated him and couldn't even talk nicely to him. Joseph's brothers went to tend their father's flocks near Shechem. Israel said to Joseph, "Aren't your brothers tending the sheep near Shechem? Come, I'll send you to them." And he said, "I'm ready." Jacob said to him, "Go, find out how your brothers are and how the flock is, and report back to me." So Jacob sent him from the Hebron Valley. When he approached Shechem, a man found him wandering in the field and asked him, "What are you looking for?" Joseph said, "I'm looking for my brothers. Tell me, where are they tending the sheep?" The man said, "They have left here. I heard them saying, 'Let's go to Dothan.'" So Joseph went after his brothers and found them in Dothan. They saw Joseph in the distance before he got close to them, and they plotted to kill him. The brothers said to each other, "Here comes the big dreamer. Come on now, let's kill him and throw him into one of the cisterns, and we'll say a wild animal devoured him. Then we will see what becomes of his dreams." When Reuben heard what they said, he saved him from them, telling them, "Let's not take his life." Reuben said to them, "Don't spill his blood. Throw him into this desert cistern, but don't lay a hand on him." He intended to save Joseph from them and take him back to his father. When Joseph reached his brothers, they stripped off Joseph's long robe, took him, and threw him into the cistern, an empty cistern with no water in it. When they sat down to eat, they looked up and saw a caravan of Ishmaelites coming from Gilead, with camels carrying sweet resin, medicinal resin, and fragrant resin on their way down to Egypt. Judah said to his brothers, "What do we gain if we kill our brother and hide his blood? Come on, let's sell him to the Ishmaelites. Let's not harm him because he is our brother. He's family." His brothers agreed. When some Midianite traders passed by, they pulled Joseph up out of the cistern. They sold him to the Ishmaelites for 20 pieces of silver, and they brought Joseph to Egypt. A word of God that is still speaking. Thanks be to God. Amen.
Well, somebody took my clicker. Talk among yourselves for a second. Because you would have been disappointed, right? Well, good morning. Good morning. You got that scripture, right? It's all down in your mind. We have been doing this amazing series that Jess and I are kind of calling out on the side as the sermon series that has no end. I am Well, I have the clicker. Let's see if it's going to. There we go. So our series is really called Anything But Ordinary. It's really been a series about family. Abraham and Sarah finally had a kid, Isaac, in accordance with God's promise to them. But there was also this other kid, Ishmael, son of Abraham, but born to his wife's slave, Hagar. Yeah, the family tree has that branch. Isaac and Rebekah gave birth to twins, Jacob and Esau, who were struggling big time in the womb. God explained that two nations were struggling within her. That seemed to make it much easier. But Jacob and Esau each wanted out first, so that the birthright belonging to the firstborn would be Esau's. Jacob was second out of the womb, holding on to Esau's heel. Now Esau was kind of a manly man who was an expert hunter, and Jacob was kind of a mama's boy who stayed home, cooked, and thought great thoughts. One late afternoon, Jacob was cooking up some red stuff, lentil stew. And Esau came in saying he was hungry, as he always was. And he told Esau to give him some of that red stuff. And Jacob said he would, as long as Esau gave him his birthright. This would have been a really good stew. Done. Years went on, and Dad, Isaac, was getting old and had terrible eyesight. Jacob knew that Isaac had to bless the one who would inherit the promise, and Mom, Rebekah, knew that as well. And Rebekah wanted Jacob to inherit. So after Jacob made an amazing meal for the old man, Mom, Rebekah, helped Jacob get all spiffy, dressed up in a goat skin, and go into his father for the blessing. And because Esau was hairy, when Isaac put his hand of blessing on the hands and neck of Isaac, he was sure he was offering the patriarchal blessing to Esau when he felt all that goat hair. Wrong. Jacob gets the blessing, runs off to his relative Laban, is tricked into working 7 years to marry the wrong daughter, then another 7 for the one he really loved. Family. Leah, his first wife, bore 4 sons, Bilhah and Zilpah, each 4 children, and then Rachel. The 12 sons of Jacob became the 12 tribes of Israel. The baby Joseph is Jacob's favorite because he is the child of Rachel, whom he really loved. Family. If you think your family is complicated, you're right. Because families are. And this may make us feel a little bit better about our own families. So in our text for today, Joseph is cutting his teeth in the family by learning to shepherd sheep. The biblical text makes it clear that Joseph differentiates between his brothers based on their mothers. So while Jacob has children by the servant women Bilhah and Zilpah, those children were separated out, if not strictly by Joseph, then by the tradition of the book of Genesis. Joseph seems to be a bit more interested in other people's business than in being a young shepherd. So Joseph collects and talks trash on those other sons and tells his father all about them. Oh, family drama. And who wouldn't like a brother like that, really? Joseph is 17 years old. 17. And he's supposed to be learning the family trade, but he's not out shepherding with the others. He's running errands for Dad. There's a whole lot of family favoritism going on here. As I was looking back on when I had preached this text before, a number of years ago, Jim Loomis, a member of this church, now moved, but a therapist and social worker, Jim helped me with the text from the perspective of a therapist. He said, in my counseling practice, I have often seen the problem of a parent showing favoritism to one child over the others, which creates a lot of resentment and a lot of dissension among the kids. I also seem to recall that not only did Jacob favor Joseph because Jacob was old when Joseph was born, but finally, here was the child from the woman that Jacob really loved and got cheated out of in the first place. I've often seen the case where the favorite child milks this for all it's worth, Jim said, and later on, he or she suffers the consequences of this. And the text goes on. So it seems that other brothers are separated out from Jacob, as some are tending family flocks near Shechem. Rather than sending Joseph to deepen his skills as the shepherd, Dad, Jacob, now Israel, sends Joseph to check up on the other boys and give a report back. Joseph is given a very high level of trust by his father, right? He loves Jacob most because he was the child by Rachel whom he really loved. He loved him so much that in 37:11, he gives him a special coat, a coat of many colors, or a long coat, depending on the translation of the Hebrew. So what's up with this dad? The gift of the colorful long coat only builds the ire of the siblings, further reminding them that Joseph is a special little snowflake. And the story is not nearly over yet. See, earlier in the text, Joseph had dreams that involved the brothers, and the brothers did not like that one bit. Rather than shrugging them off and humoring Joseph, they just plotted to kill him. It's a family story. Nice. Look, the plot to kill Joseph is really a storyline mechanism to get rid of the issue. We may not literally kill family members, I hope, but we certainly do find ways to kill or silence issues in our family lives, right? My family, many of your families, many families everywhere bury the issues and keep the tensions below the surface rather than talk about what's really going on. Now, Reuben is the eldest son of Jacob, Israel, birthed by Jacob's first wife, Leah. He would have had the birthright of the firstborn and knew that he simply needed to play his cards right. He needed to behave, and whatever Israel had would be divided first to him. Reuben steps in to save Joseph, but he does not stand up to the others. It's a family dynamic that you may know a little bit from your own experience. It's the dynamic of smoothing over, taking the path of least resistance while not getting anyone what is wanted or what is needed. The peacemaker is a typical role for a member of the family, a role that tends to make things momentarily better, but does little to move forward understanding and reconciliation. That takes the consent and involvement of all involved, and that doesn't happen. Jacob, as patriarch, has created a wound and has allowed it to fester. Too many families would rather live with the festering than be vulnerable and actually take the risk of hard conversations where you might find reconciliation. Of course, the irony of the text is that Joseph is in fact saved by the happen-chance passing of the relatives of Ishmael, the child of Abraham, born to the maidservant Hagar. It's a lot, right? Ishmael, in effect, saves the one who will ultimately be responsible for saving the promise that Israel would be a great nation, a great people. Add to that the irony that Ishmael was born to a slave and is bringing Joseph into slavery. That Judah, another son of Leah, offers up the deal as a mark that foreshadows the point at which the nation, the monarchy, is divided into north and south, into Israel and Judah. Judah may be all about family here, but he is strategic in his thinking. The brothers conjure up a way to profit from the conflict in their family dynamics. You've probably never seen that, but it happens. Family members that want in on the end-of-life property decisions, for instance. The arm wrestling and family competition around who should be making decisions. The pettiness that can accompany stressors of feeling less than another family member, feeling less loved. Judah tries to find a way out of the mess by wheeling and dealing. Never works in family systems because, again, it does not deal with the heart of the issues. Are you seeing anything in your own experience here? Never works because it does not go deep enough. The stressors, the conflicts are still on the table, or better, they're really under the table. As Jim Loomis said years ago, I've never seen it work. First of all, what I've seen is that sometimes the wronged children won't let go of being wronged because they profit from it also, just like the favored child profits from his or her status. Also, it doesn't really deal with the underlying issue, which is that Jacob should have apologized to his older sons and treated all of the kids equitably. And the kids needed to talk about it, bury their haughtiness and jealousy, and get on with life. They needed to especially get on the problem of taking care of dad as he gets older and less able to care for himself. And again, none of us have any experience with that. Also, I've seen a lot of cases where dad never gets it. And sometimes dad finally figures it out. And in this case with Jacob, maybe he remembers that he set himself up for this when he cheated his brother out of his birthright. But even if dad gets it, dad doesn't seem to be able to fix it because it's gone on too long, and now it's bred into the very DNA of the family. This is how we do it when we get together, and dad takes this terrible regret to his grave. It always makes me wonder how the kids will play out in their own families. You know, that whole thing about the signs of the fathers being remembered to the third and the fourth generations. And some of us know how it gets played out. Indeed, family systems, like all systems, are best at maintaining themselves. Even if the systems are unhealthy, even if they are dangerous, until there's a decided break in the service, in the system, until someone calls a halt and says, enough, we've got to talk this through. Until Jacob sees what is going on and his role in starting the whole thing. Until siblings come together to talk it through, to confess, to reconcile, to forgive. None of it's easy. And that is the very point. None of it is easy. The text we have been looking at in this anything but ordinary series without an end point us to the complications human beings create when we step outside of faithful living, where love and justice and righteousness are cornerstones of all life, including and particularly family life. This week, because we are all parts of family, I think, I invite us to take stock of our familial relationships. Where are there wounds that have not been healed in your families? Where are there wounds that have been only bandaged, covered up but not really healed? Or where are there scars from the past that are carried as not terribly subtle reminders of what you've been through? What conversations still need to happen in your family? What requests for forgiveness need to occur? And what, following forgiveness, what reconciliation has to happen? What new ways of being family might emerge for you? As we move to communion, I remind us that Jesus was gathered with closest of friends. They were family, and they were not perfect. They did not do all the talking in all the right ways. They played off each other with some frequency. Some denied, some even betrayed. And still they gathered. Still they gathered at the table. And so, family, I invite us to gather at the table.
Okay, Barry.
Okay, Jess.
What did you want us, what nugget did you?
Well, what I really wanted us to leave with was a sense that we are all part of families that have systems and dynamics, and we each play roles in family systems. I don't know anyone who hasn't come to a place of struggle within their own family. It may not be to the extent of our older siblings throwing us into slavery, but there are things that go on in families.
Mm-hmm.
Some of those hijinks. It's easy for us to think that there's nothing we could do about it, or that we are not involved, or even worse, we are not to blame. Systems require all of us to play our parts in the systems, and I wanted to do a little bit of messing with that, understanding that probably bring people to a place where they could raise some questions outside of worship, more in a pastoral relationship.
I think, so why did you decide to go that route with this text when in reality we probably could have picked any? to talk about family systems and our need to be thoughtful about it.
Oh, because this one's so absurd. I mean, the story is so far removed from where most of us are, and I think it's easy for us to take this very archaic story and say, well, that was really weird. In reality, we're all pretty weird, and our stories are strange in their own right. So to be able to take Joseph and say, here are some things that were going on in this family system that are not that far removed from ours.
Mm-hmm. Something I really appreciated, I know this work started in the field of psychology and counseling with family systems, but you can really extend the family systems model to almost every community you're a part of. And I think that's an interesting and helpful application for us who, might have sorted out, done some work on ourselves regarding our familial relationships, but want to think through our workplaces or our neighborhoods, or it's really, I think sometimes people think it's just limited to family. It really goes beyond that. And the family, is the first place we form any identity or lack thereof in some capacity. So I think it's an interesting place to start, and we kind of see that with Joseph and the identity that's kind of placed on him in this particular way that he lives into and loves.
Yes.
Excuse me, you're supposed to say yes and.
Yes and.
So, be my improv partner.
Yeah, clearly, and we do family talk a lot. We hear it in corporate America now that we're community, we're family. I just watched a dystopian movie the other night called The Circle with Tom Hanks and Emma Watson, and it's about a Apple-like or Google-like company that finds ways to really take the model and move it out into the world. But they're all always talking about the family, and the family has secrets. The family has to uphold the values, and even when you stand outside of them. When we talk about church as family, it's problematic in the same way as that, because when I was born into family, I'm told very early on that I'm a part of family, and here's what is expected of you as part of family.
Mm-hmm.
Church becomes problematic in that way because people are coming and going all the time, and it's far too easy for folks who've been around longer to not see newer people as a part of the family until they've been around for a while.
Mm-hmm.
So, yes.
If someone wanted to start, you kind of gave a pretty broad, like, hey, I'd like you to be thinking about your family and your family systems. But if someone needed you to distill that into where's the starting point? What is a good first homework assignment if someone finds themselves drawn to this kind of inner and outer work for you?
I would do some writing about the place. No, I would do some writing first about what do you celebrate and what concerns you about your family, and then what role do you play in your family?
Yeah, I was thinking about that too, and it made me think about belonging. Where do I belong? Because some of us don't feel like we belong with our family of origin.
Yes.
Some of us were kicked out of our family of origin, so we were told very clearly we don't belong. And so we have this ideal, this kind of blood is thicker than water mentality sometimes, but that's not often a helpful phrase, nor is that always a helpful way to understand where you belong, to whom you belong, and what belonging really looks like. But I couldn't figure out how to get that other than just the concept of belonging. So I think your intro assignment is helpful. What do I celebrate? What am I, critical of? What am I curious about? And what role do I play?
Yeah, and I think in that self conversation is would I choose this? Would I choose this? Family. There's lots of sanguine kinds of bumper sticker kinds of thinking about family. The family is the place where you will always be welcome. Well, that doesn't
feel that way to a lot of us all the time. To be able to think through that, and what is yours to change. Sometimes it's not healthy to go back to family, and if the family is not going to welcome you exactly as you are and who you are, that's problematic.
Yeah. I was thinking about this because this is interesting. As more people would indicate they feel like their family is going in a different ideological direction than they are. And I find there's that kind of squishy place of knowing, when is your family harming you, or when are they just annoying, or when do they just say things that are abhorrent that you don't feel like you have the capacity to call out. And that's interesting to me, that intersection between, like, when are you actively being harmed, and yes, like, it's very fair to go no contact and no relationship, but when might you have a calling from the greater good to call out your racist uncle and say, we're not going to let you talk like that anymore.
I made mention in the sermon that there's this tendency to push things under the rug, under the table, and when we find ourselves being complicit in letting truth be shoved under the table, so that we're living this other kind of higher reality, something we consider to be higher. I mean, there was joke among the siblings in my family whenever we got together, because we start going, yeah, remember all those good days? Remember when we used to go to camping together as a family, and we just, we played great games together, we have great conversation. None of that ever happened. But we kind of played up this kind of ideal reality, because what the reality really was is that awful lot of stuff just got pushed under the table. We did not talk about my father's alcoholism or his violence. We did not talk about the realities of how far apart we were as siblings, and that's not to anybody's benefit.
Yeah, it is. It's hard to be, I think, prescriptive in that sense, because at some level, I would imagine you and your siblings and others that are in the same place, frankly, just had to survive.
Sure.
And so, sometimes you knew what bringing something up would mean, or what the outcomes would be, or consequences. But then there's the reckoning with it at another point. It's just all of these family intricacies of, where do we have this boundary between self and this family unit are hard, and how much do we allow in, and how different do you want to be, and it's just these stories in scripture. I say this every single week. They highlight this so beautifully. They are not high-minded theology.
No.
They're often very confusing stories of very complex humans, which at this point, really resonates, I think, with where a lot of us are at coming out of this global pandemic, if you can call it that, and trying to take stock of what really matters to us, what we want our lives to be like, who we want in our lives, what we're willing to put up with from those people,
Sure.
and what we're not.
In the Joseph cycle, which I was mentioning this morning in staff, that it's the longest continuous cycle of scripture, stories of Joseph. And it's an interesting thing, because we have the stories going on in the family, and that's what we're concentrating on. But there are sub-stories too that we need to take account of in our own lives. Like, who are the people around us who are struggling or suffering because of our shenanigans? In Joseph, there was all kinds of slavery going on. When Joseph's welcoming his father and siblings back, and he's going to bring him a gold chariot and all of this stuff, that's all being done at the cost of others in a time of drought, famine. And Joseph says, that's okay, I'm going to take care of you. Well, that's out of his power. So, I think that part of our conversation about family is our, what we consider to be our nuclear family. But then around us, there are folks who are dealing with our stuff as well, and our decisions.
Yeah. And sometimes that might not be readily apparent or even super explicit.
Yeah.
Yeah, we might not even take stock of the ways in which.
Because sometimes it's just, I'm sorry, I interrupted you.
Go ahead.
Sometimes it's just hard enough to take stock of ourselves and our families.
Yeah, that's absolutely true. Well, you had a communion Sunday, so this was a shorter message for you, but you filled it up with lots of things for us to think about. What made you, I think I know why, because I appreciated it, but what made you go through kind of the retelling of the lineage in the beginning?
I wanted one, because we kind of picked up on this. We've been through this and this and this in the series. I wanted to do it particularly as a matter of lineage to understand that this family just didn't come out of nowhere. This was a product of generations, and that it was not going to stop with this story. It's going to go on generationally beyond that. But the decisions that are made in every generation comes back again to either bless or haunt in some way the generation to come.
Yeah. I feel like there's been more cultural conversation about that too, about generational trauma and how we're understanding that trauma affects us even on a cellular level, and we carry it on to future generations. And the wisdom of these ancient peoples, kind of writing that down and talking about it so succinctly. I'm consistently amazed whenever I go through these stories, thinking through how there was no need to laud or protect these patriarchs from their own stories. Like, that wasn't the point of the story. Like, we have this deification, I think, sometimes. We see this today with political figures or whoever. Like, they can't, they're not allowed to have any nuance. They must just be perfect. And I think it's so beautiful to look at these patriarchs, all of whom, don't seem like they'd make great spouses or partners or maybe parents in some ways. Really complex figures. And in that sense, perhaps very relatable. But just the telling of the stories in these beautifully nuanced ways. All right, Barry, is there rabbit holes you went down that you didn't get to talk about? Are there things you wish you did differently?
I would have spent more time talking about some of the different personality types, and family systems, and how they engage. Some of it is age or pecking order within the family, but not exclusively. I mean, I would have liked to talk more about those things, but there's not time to do that in a sermon, and particularly not in a sermon where we've got a communion Sunday, so there was a time factor. But one of the things that I appreciated is this was, I went back, as I always do, I go back and look at what I had preached on a text before, and came upon a piece that I did with Dr. Jim Loomis many years ago, and so I wanted to pull some of that up. But it was more than I wanted to do for this sermon, so planted seeds.
Yeah, and folks can reach out if they want to know more. There's a few, I'm sure you do too, have a few pretty easy to read resources if someone wants to start with this work that are helpful. And it's mostly just, you start with you.
Yeah.
Family systems isn't like, hey, how's everyone else in your family horrible?
Yeah, we have a few therapists related to the congregation. Maybe we'll see if they'd be willing to do a introductory family systems class at some point.
That would be really fun. Wonderful.
I'm all about fun.
Well, next week we get to welcome back Reverend Jenna Bawaggy to his home congregation, Chapel Hill. You all supported him through seminary, and this has been the primary place of further discerning that calling is a little bit of a faith home. So we're excited to welcome him back and celebrate his ordination.
And he's going to be doing the next section of this with the reconciliation between Joseph and his brothers.
Mm-hmm.
Stay tuned for that.
We'll see you next week.